You need a tissue. All right, so come on stage. We are starting a new series today, and it is called For the Love of God. And as we're getting set up here to interact with that, our kind of theme verse for this particular series is from 2 Corinthians chapter 15 and verse 14. It says, For Christ's love compels us, because we are convinced that one died for all, and therefore all died. And it's interesting, the verse before that, it says, For if we are beside ourselves, it's for God. If we are of sound mind, it is for you. For the love of God compels us. And so there's an interaction that happens there of our responsibility in relation to other people. The reason that we are being mindful of making God's truth and His power and His presence and His love meaningful to people around us, in other words, being of a sound mind to people around us, is because love compels us. It's for the love of God that we want to make things as meaningful and the truth of God, the truth of Christ, accessible to anyone, whether they've been at a church or if they've never heard of Christianity before. We want to make sure that Christ is accessible to all people in those places. And so that's really kind of what this month is about. It's about God's love. It's about the love of Christ that is compelling us. And this right here, what we're endeavoring to do here is motivated out of that, because one of the ways that Jesus ministered is by answering questions. In fact, many of the things that we learn in the Gospels that are some of the most profound truths that we read in the Bible is because somebody asked Jesus a question and He answered it. And so recognizing that answering questions is a way that we learn, the love of God compels us to make a venue for that to happen. So it's kind of an experiment to see how that would look for us in this environment. And so what we did is ask you guys to go onto our website and to submit some questions. And I think I have like 19 questions, which gives us about 30 seconds apiece to answer them. And so we don't have to answer them all. We'll get through what we can, and just it'll be a chance for you to get to know us a little bit more, as well as also interesting to hear your guys' heart, the things that you wanted answered. That's really interesting to kind of discover what those are. And so with that being said, I'm going to open in prayer, and then we're going to get into our Q&A time. Heavenly Father, I thank you that you have answers. And I pray, Lord, that somehow in the midst of what we say, your answers would come out. And we thank you for this time of being able to celebrate what you were about and what you are about here in this place as well. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, so one thing I want to have here is, Pastor Micah, can you tell us about your trip to Florida?
So last week, my girls and I, we have a daughter who's 7 and one who's almost 2 years old. We went down to Florida for about a week, and we spent a little bit of time in Orlando, just me and the girls, and then we went down to a area that's like south of Tampa, about an hour or so away from Tampa, and ministered at a church there. And so there was a church that had me come in on a Friday night and then their Sunday morning service. And Friday night I did music, I led worship, and then preached, and then prayed for people. And that was a really fun service. They call it their Friday night fire service, and it's just really for them to get more passionate about God and just have more fuel to the flame that's already inside. And so because it's in Florida and it's like winter time, a lot of the people who came forward for prayer for healing, it was a lot of really serious things because there are a lot of older people. And so that was a little intimidating for me because it was a whole line of people. I was there till like 10:30 at night praying for people. But it was really, really powerful just to see their expectation of God bringing them healing. One story I'll tell really fast. There's a lady who was probably in her mid-40s, and she's had some health issues her whole life. But until last June, she was very mobile and like able to do stuff. But starting in June, all of a sudden she just lost mobility and is confined in a wheelchair and can't feed herself. And she's like mid-40s, and her mom takes care of her full time. And so they waited till the end. They were just really patient. And so it's like 10:15 or 10 o'clock at night. And as I grabbed this lady's hands who's confined to a wheelchair, I just heard God say that her worship is beautiful, and that in that place of her spirit wanting to do what her body can't do, I just felt like that her spirit is worshiping God even if her body can't. She can't like lift her arms. And so I just spoke that out, and she just started sobbing and sobbing and sobbing. And I prayed for physical healing as well. But what she said was that she felt like 1,000 pounds of weight lifted off of her, and that she finally knows what to do in this time, because it's only been 6 months, and so it's kind of a new thing for her to like process. And so she said she finally knows what she can do and how she can worship God. And so that was so beautiful and so precious. So I did that Friday night, and then Sunday morning came back to the same church and preached. And it was a great service. And they're just a really great bunch of people. So they're excited for me to come back and for Ben to come as well. And then that night, Sunday night, I taught at a ministry school where Alex is from his old group of people, church in Florida. And with his sister, Elizabeth, she does the school there. And so she brought me down, and I taught on dream interpretation from a biblical perspective. And so I got to do that. And that was really, really fun. So then came back on Tuesday. So that was my trip.
Right. So kind of related, that was a question asking if anyone here can travel with us. My wife and I do some traveling ministry. You can go to releasinglife.com and find out about our traveling ministry that we do. And it's just kind of a part of our assignment from God as ministering outside of here. In fact, this week, I could be ministering here in a conference called The Stirring that's happening into this week. On Saturday, I'm speaking in a youth conference in Harrisburg, and on Saturday evening, my wife is heading over to help worship in York. And so a little bit of a busy week. But those kind of things are on that website. And if you're interested in doing any traveling with us, you can send us a message and can look at that as a possibility. So that being said, I want to ask, this is a question for everybody here, very serious question, and it is, how do you dress your hot dog? What do you do? How do you like your hot dog?
Go ahead.
I didn't have enough time to think about it. Honesty, I don't like anything on my hot dog. Sorry, I'm boring.
He's a plain dog guy.
Yeah, plain dog.
I usually make my own ketchup, and it's sugar-free and tasty, and then I eat it like that on like flatbread.
You guys have a microphone down here? Oh, you left it down there. Oh, thank you, William. Sorry.
Did you answer? Yeah, you should answer, Ben.
Oh, the way I like my hot dog is with mayonnaise, ketchup. Nope, mayonnaise and mustard. Actually, mayonnaise and mustard. Some bacon's not bad. Get some bacon, as long as it's crispy. Hallelujah. It's good. Sometimes I like it on sourdough bread, toasted sourdough bread. Put it right in there. Change your life. All right, we'll pass this.
It depends. I like sometimes ketchup, no bun, never a bun, just the hot dog. Because that's the best part for me, is give me the meat, forget the bread. So sometimes ketchup, sometimes mustard. and then sometimes with baked beans.
That's nice. Yeah, is there ever a hot dog that isn't good? Anything but ketchup. But generally speaking, my go-to is chili, cheese, onions, and mustard. I'm going to drop the mic.
Check. Test.
What-
Test.
If I do have a hot dog, the only thing I could say is has to be organic. It has to be organic.
Organic. I'm an all beef kind of guy. All beef, organic. Okay. Okay, Ward and Ellen, where do you see the music ministry of Convergence Center going?
Excellent question, Ben. Thank you for asking it, even though you probably didn't. When someone is interested in joining the worship team at Convergence Center or being involved in the worship ministry, we have something that we read. I'm going to read it very quickly. It'll take a couple minutes just to give you all a little insight of who we are, what we see ourselves as in regard to servants and worship, and where we see ourselves going. So if you don't mind, I'm going to read this quickly. And there are 4 areas. We believe that being committed to Convergence Center is necessary to serve in ministry, especially in worship. This doesn't mean that one must be at all Convergence Center services or functions, or if you are living in the area temporarily, you can't get involved in worship. What it means is that we consider Convergence our home church, even as for a season. We consider our time at Convergence an investment in building His kingdom by allowing God to use us in the lives of the people who call Convergence home. Serving in worship is a reflection of the love we have for Him and the desire we have to see our church family experience all He has for them. We will trust God to grow this body and committed individuals who have a desire to see this church reach heaven's potential. We believe worship is both personal and corporate. When participating in leading worship by being on the worship team, it's important to keep in mind that we have a more direct impact on corporate worship than if we are not serving on the team. This requires musical ability. There are no requirements that one must meet to worship God. However, all who desire to serve in leading will need to be able to walk in humility and to be able to take direction or correction. Pursuing musical excellence is also part of Convergence worship. We desire to give God our very best as a ministry. Pursuing excellence isn't perfection in music or in life. The pursuit of excellence in our personal lives is even more important than musical excellence. It is essential to serve in the worship ministry at Convergence. And then I say, if we sing with tongues of angels and have not love, we're a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. We will not set a spiritual standard that all who qualify would be, quote, allowed to serve in Convergence worship. There would be no worship team if that were the case. Instead, we will agree that we will walk in humility, pursuing each one pursuing Him, and bear one another's burdens, walk in transparency and grace with one another when we choose to walk in true accountability. We will call out excellence, both in our personal journeys and musically in one another, because that's what we were created for. And finally, where we see Convergence worship going. Oh, by the way, this is my wife, Ellen, if you didn't know. Ward, Ellen. Hey there, thanks, Elizabeth. Serving in humility is important when we look at the future of our church as a whole, and more specifically, the worship ministry. The sky is the limit for us, and we believe that God will be growing us as a church and a worship ministry. We are responsible to steward the positions that we have, even if they might be temporary. We all understand that we are not entitled to our roles. We are simply servants on the Convergence worship team. We believe that God will be growing us individually as we serve and worship, and He'll also be bringing new individuals to take us to deeper levels and greater musical excellence. We'll set up multiple worship teams. I'm hoping to have multiple worship teams, multiple worship leaders would be great that we can set up. But ultimately, Convergence worship will be a vibrant, passionate group of individuals unified for one goal: to declare the goodness of our Father, to magnify Jesus and make Him famous, and declare and witness the uncontainable power of the Holy Spirit, bringing transformation in life. Sorry if that took too long. I read it as fast as I could. So that's where we see worship going. If you have a heart for worship, just let me know. We're on an awesome journey. It's fun stuff. Do you have anything to add, beautiful? I said it all.
And what he said actually reminded us of something. Should introduce these guys. So down this way,
My name is Alex. I do sound and media here. I've been here since the beginning.
all right.
I'm Katie. I am Pastor Ben's and Pastor Micah's intern here at Convergence Center, and I am also in charge, of the children's ministry here.
Again, I'm Ward. Ellen, we had a worship coordination, and we've been here for a while, 3 years, something like that.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. All right, so, okay, so one question we got in is, why the name Convergence Center? It's a little scary to people, and they think it's Scientology or something. Sorry if you really like the name. That's a great question. I love it. And I love the sweetness in it. Sorry if you like it. We said any question goes, so thank you for asking. In fact, I like this particular question because of a specific encounter I had at a local restaurant where I was in line and the cashier was interacting with the person in front of me and started talking about extra dimensions and different things like that. And so while they were not speaking about what the Bible was saying, I thought that it would be fun to interject my thoughts into it because the Bible does speak about other dimensions. The Bible says that God is invisible. There's dimensions of angels and different things. And so anyway, I thought it'd be fun to invite myself into the conversation, so I did. And it was just had this really, really funny exchange. It was obvious they were coming kind of from a New Age perspective. And they really loved how looking at the Bible was showing some things from the Bible's perspective on this. And the guy who was the cashier I was talking to, he wanted to know about our church and how he could find out where we met and all this kind of stuff. And so I was talking to him about that. Was giving him our website, which is convergencepa.com. So I told him the name of our church is Convergence Center. And he looked at me after I said our name is Convergence, and then he looked up in the sky and said, "Convergence, of course." And it took everything in me not to fall down laughing at that moment. It was so priceless. So I understand where the question comes from, because you won't find the word convergence in the Bible. And so you're like, where in the world did that come from? Some of that comes from our core values as a ministry, and some of it comes from how we got started. And so a core value of Convergence Center is bringing together things of value and seeing them work together that you don't normally see together. And so that applies in several different areas. One has to do with the way that we approach ministry is we've pulled on various what we call streams of ministry. And that means that we've pulled on what's called non-spirit-filled churches. And some of the philosophies of ministry that come from that and approaches, because we don't think that we have the corner on everything that's good. And so we try to learn from different people and different streams and pull those things. So you actually see a mixture of how we operate and what we do that is drawing from the strengths of things that are happening in other churches and in other streams. That doesn't mean that we don't have anything that's unique to us, but I'm saying that we want to learn from those. We also find what we've wanted to do is to have different understandings of how we can interact as people. And so it's not represented very well up here on the stage today, but when we first got started, we had several different ethnicities that were staff members. And we believe that this is a great reflection of the kingdom of God and of heaven. And so just because we all happen to be white up here is not the way that we started. And not necessarily what our heart is, but that's the way it is. And so we believe that there are strengths. We believe there's only one race, the human race, and there are different ethnicities and different cultures, and that there's strength in life in all of it. And we also believe in bringing together bringing together things about these different streams I mentioned earlier. And so you find some streams are really strong in the area of going after the presence of God, and so they have worship for an hour and a half or 2 hours because they really just want to go after God. You have other places that are really have a high value for making sure their services and what they do are meaningful to somebody who is not familiar with church. And so trying to put those two together takes a lot of work. Because you have one group that wants to worship for hours and hours, and another group that says that doesn't make any sense to someone if they don't even know if they believe in God or not. And so for us, what we've done as an example of showing those values together is actually what we're doing today. Is we have a shorter amount of worship during the beginning of our service, which we experienced this morning. And then we have an official close, and then we have extra worship at the end. So that people that want to leave or don't know if they believe in God or not, and they're like, I don't want to sit through an hour and a half of people worshiping a God I don't even know if I believe in or not, those people are free to go. And those who are like, I just got started, and now you're moving on, those people have extra time. And so we find a value trying to tie in and mix together the strengths of those various streams. So that's the name Convergence. The actual word convergence means to bring multiple things together into one point. And so that's part of our philosophy, is bringing together strengths we have represented here, not just different ethnicities, but also different church backgrounds. And how we function with influence that comes from all kind of different backgrounds in church history that influence how we minister. And so we can get more details if you want to ask that specifically, but we're looking at bringing those things together, converging those things together to make a stronger ministry that's an expression of God's heart. Second has to do with the history of Convergence Center, that we started this ministry in relationship with the inner city church, St. Paul Missionary Baptist, and the pastor of that church, Earl Harris, is the overseer. And part of, again, talking about Convergence, we're bringing together a suburban ministry and an inner city ministry together. And what would it look like for us to function in relationship and to love this region together? And so that was how we actually got started. And from that, one day the pastor was in this building and was getting prayed for, and the person praying for him felt like God told him, all the promises that God has been speaking to you are now converging in your life. And at that time, we had really been praying quite a bit about what are you calling this church that we're starting? What are you wanting to call it? And when he received that message at that time, it was like it stood out with flashing lights, and I was getting slapped across the face going, that's it. And that the name of what I'm starting with you guys is called Convergence. It's about bringing these things together. And so we're still in a relationship with that church. We used to have people on staff that actually attended both services. In fact, we have Cheryl back here who just moved back to the area. She used to be on staff with us and went to both services. And so we used to have that, and we try to do things periodically together as ministries. And Pastor Harris preaches here, and I preach in that church as well. So that's kind of that's where I'm going Saturday for the youth event. They're expecting between 200 and 300 youth, and so I'll be ministering with St. Paul Missionary Baptist on Saturday. So that's a little bit of where that name came from and what it's about. Anything you want to add? Okay. All right. Let's move on to some other questions here. Yeah. So, Alex, what are you passionate about?
I'm so thankful that you asked me that, Ben. This hits two of the things that I'm passionate about most, public speaking and talking about myself. So I'm ready. We got 15 minutes. I think I can wrap it up. And then now my relationship with God is obviously paramount. That's what I'm passionate about most. Outside of that, I think my family is my ministry. My kids, my job, my work, things like that are kind of the things that I've been trusted with, and so I want to honor God by taking care of those things and working as hard as I can inside my home and outside my home. And outside of that, I've got hobbies. I love baseball, I love music, things like that. But I would say the thing I'm most passionate about is outside of my relationship with God is definitely my family. So
Thanks, Alex.
that's it.
For sharing. And Alex actually has a degree in lighting and sound, so that's pretty awesome. And someone asked if we ordain people. We do not ourselves. If you're interested in finding out information about ordination, you can ask, and we can lead you to where that could happen. Let's see. Let's do this. What do you call freedom to worship with regards to freely worshiping during worship time? So have you guys start.
That's a me answer?
You can
Yeah,
start.
I can start. I'll allow anyone to interject. We understand that worshiping is not about us, right? We understand that it's all about Him. Everything we do is to glorify Him. Everything we do is to give Him honor and praise. And what He's calling us to is a deeper expression of that. And that has to do with our hearts more than anything else. So we may find ourselves in a place where our hearts compel us, or He compels us to express ourselves in worship in different ways, flags or dancing, and shouting, painting, making bread, whatever He's calling us to. So actually, I like bread, okay?
All right.
Yeah, thank you.
And
But
chili cheese dogs.
so I think the heart of worship is that our God is central to it. At Convergence Center, I believe our desire is that there would be such a freedom in worship that we could express ourselves in any way that we'd want to, as long as it's making sure that He is central in worship. Like if we're dancing and there's a little too much hip shaking going on, stuff like that. That probably wouldn't be good. But so let's just put it this way. As worship coordinator here, I want to set you guys free, because I believe that it's probably better to have an area where we have freedom in worship, where we have to rein some things back, maybe that might be distracting, might be unhealthy, or maybe there might be some teaching, some times of teaching, rather than keep everybody in reins. We're like, oh no, let's keep everything subdued. I think that's where my heart's at in that, because as long as we understand that everything we do in worship, whether it's singing, dancing, sitting, praying, walking our daily lives, working at our jobs, or loving our families, that whatever we do, we're doing it as unto Him, and He is central. When it flips to become about us, or feeling good, or getting a spiritual high, or whatever, then we might find ourselves. But that's also very personal. So I would just submit to you that if you want to experience Him more, and you want to have more freedom in worship, pray to Him. Ask Him, Lord, I want to honor You with every fiber of my being. What does that look like? He's a personal God. If you ask Him questions, He'll talk to you. He'll set you free. He'll bring you a place of intimacy in that. I guess that's pretty much it. Is there anything you guys want to add?
I don't. You can.
I'll just add a little bit. So freedom to worship, too, is that inside of you that there aren't distractions keeping you from being able to express your worship to God. And I will say that there are some times where being free to worship is trying to do something that might be uncomfortable at first. Like the first time I raised my hands to God, it was like everybody is looking at me, and oh my gosh, I stand out now. This is scary. I want to pull my arms down. But I knew that there was a really a symbol that was happening as I was using my arms to lift them in worship to the Lord. And I know that the more that I've done that, like just kind of follow His leading and what to do with my arms, or like to close my eyes, or to kneel, or to do something physically, that it really activates something in the spirit realm. And it's really not like measurable, it's not really tangible, but it's true. And so in the Bible, there's just a lot of explanations about worship that are demonstrative, like yelling and jumping and spinning and dancing. And so being free to be able to do that might be uncomfortable at first, but it's almost like we sang this morning about lifting Him higher, that whatever He is like leading us into, lifting His call higher than our comfort ability, like comfort level, is like an act of faith to trust that he will respond in that way, but also knowing that we're not looking around at everybody and going, okay, who's lifting their hands? Okay, who's dancing? Like, there's no judging, like, what your actions are, because I also know there are times when I can't move and I'm stuck, and it's just because there's, like, an exchange that's happening, and outside it might look like nothing's happening, but inside there's so much that's happening, and so we know that as well. So just as we look at this phrase, freedom to worship, know that it means we want you to be free to try different ways to worship, but also that if you're just wanting to sit or knowing that you're connecting with God in silence or just not moving, that's freedom to worship as well. So that's how we want you to be here at Convergence, is free, but also like knowing that you can express more if you want.
I just want to say that, Ward, you really, really just restricted Alex a lot. He likes doing a lot of hip motion back there. He really does. We've had to talk about it, but that's why he does it in the back over there, so it's not distracting. That, in relation to worship, we told you about our core values of making things meaningful to people. And so don't be surprised along the way if we explain something. And so if you're worshiping in a certain way and then somebody gets up at a platform and says, you might have noticed that people were dancing, and says something about it, it's because we don't want to pretend or assume that everyone that's here is comfortable with it or familiar with it. Yeah. And an explanation goes a long way. And so we might say, you might have seen flags, and maybe that's new to you, something like that. So we try to be aware that things are new to people, and at times we'll say something about it. All right? And it's not to try to embarrass somebody or say what you did was wrong. It's because we want to have an environment that if you invite somebody here that isn't familiar with church, you know that we're not trying to put God in the back room and hide him. And at the same time, we're not pretending that those people are familiar with everything, so you know things will be explained to them. Okay? So you might have that happen during worship as well. We are quickly running out of time, so we're going to, there was some questions that were submitted about being biblical and systematic theology, our doctrinal beliefs. What are the evidence that we're a biblically based church, and those kind of things. So let me just speak into that for just a moment, and then one more thing, and then we're going to have to wrap up the day already. And if you want to know what we believe doctrinally as Convergence Center, you can go to our website, convergencepa.com. And in that, on our website, it has listed under the About Us, it has what we believe area. And you can scroll down through that and read specifically the things that we believe. But the number one way, besides getting an overview of that, of knowing if we're presenting things that are true from the Bible and that we're teaching what Jesus said to do, is to be familiar with the Bible yourself. And so if you go to the bank, the best way that they know that there is a counterfeit is because they're familiar with the real money. And so the best way to know if we're being biblical is to know the Bible for you. And then ask questions. If you're not sure about something, feel free to ask anything. Write anything on the connection cards. Send emails. More than happy to interact with you about that. But those are some of the best ways to know what are we teaching, what we believe. You can find an overview of that on our website. And then know the Bible yourself. The Bible. There are different ways to approach the Bible. You heard me say the word systematic theology, which is kind of a Bible college term that is a certain approach to unpacking what the Bible talks about. And that's basically looking at certain topics specifically. And it has value. Looking at like salvation or looking at the Holy Spirit, things like that are specific things that are looked at. And there are volumes of books with multiple thousands of pages that pertain to those. And what's interesting is they don't all agree with each other. Even the systematic theology books, they don't agree with each other. And the reason for that is everyone has our own lenses that we view truth from. And so we, even when it comes to reading the Bible, and systematic theology has some weaknesses in it, in that it can miss some of the surrounding context when you pull one verse out because it said the word Holy Spirit in it, and you don't really look at it in its context. And so we approach the Bible, including systematic theology, but also a biblical hermeneutic, where we look at the Bible holistically and how the Bible unfolds all together. And the Bible's one long story, and how does it fit within that? And when you do that, you get more of a holistic approach to things that are being unpacked in Scripture. If you have any specific questions, I know I kind of ran through that quick, but please feel free to ask anything along those lines. In just a minute, we're going to receive our offering. And so someone said, do you believe in tithing? So I thought maybe that'd be a good question to answer that someone sent in. And there are a lot of other really great questions here that we just ran out of time of doing, but maybe another time. If there's interest in doing this kind of thing, we'll do it again on another month, maybe when a month that has 5 Sundays on it. Maybe we'll do it on a month like that. And so, do you believe in tithing? The short answer is no and yes. That's the short answer. And the kind of expanded idea of that is the word tithe means 10%. If you're not familiar with that terminology, it means 10%. And it is related to in what's called the Old Testament. You have kind of 2 parts of your Bible, Old Testament and a New Testament. And the Old Testament is related to what's called an Old Covenant and the starting of a law. I don't really have time to unpack that right now. But in that system was started what was called a tithe, which was helped to fund the religious system and political system of the country of Israel. And they were kind of tied together within that framework. And when Christ came, he changed some things, and that's why there's quite a bit of questions about how does tithe fit into this thing. And so it's my personal belief that tithing is not a law that Christians live under. So that's my no, okay, that tithing, you're not robbing from God, as some of Old Testament specifically related, their specific law said you're supposed to do this, and if you don't, you're robbing me. And if you rob me, you're going to have everything fall apart in your life. I'm summarizing very generally. And so you can look up Hebrews chapter 8 sometime if you want to. And it speaks about the law passing into the new covenant being started in Christ. And so from that, the things that I draw is the things that were pertaining to the law are not requirements. And it doesn't mean it goes against the new covenant that Jesus was starting, but those things take on a different mindset in a new covenant. And so to really summarize this for our sake of time, the Bible speaks about first fruits, and that was started before the idea of tithing started. I believe in first fruits, which is that you give in worship to God first in our lives. That giving is not an afterthought. I've got some change in my pocket, I'll do something with it. But it is giving to God first. I also have an understanding that in a new covenant, many people use scriptures regarding a special offering that was being received as speaking about the day in and day out functions of a local church, and I think that's incorrect. A lot of the verses in the New Testament are regarding a special offering that the Apostle Paul was receiving to take to Jerusalem, and was not about how the daily church functioned. That being said, there are some principles to draw from that, and I don't have time to go into it, but in 1 Corinthians 9, you can read some of those things where he makes a reference to the Old Covenant law and says, this isn't a requirement. I don't demand some of these things, but I could. And this is what God, I'll highlight one verse here. So, verse 14, so also the Lord directed those who proclaim the gospel to get their living from the gospel. And when you looked at in context, it specifically is speaking about the Old Covenant law and the inner workings of the temple and the priests and that kind of thing. And so here's my point. Are you robbing God if you don't give tithe? I don't believe so. I do believe that if you feel that God is telling you to give less than 10% on a regular basis, you're not hearing from God. Because we are in what the Bible calls a better covenant. And if we're in a better covenant, it doesn't make any logical sense that we should give less than those who are in a lesser covenant. And so my wife and I make it our absolute minimum to give 10%. That if they can give 10% in the old covenant, that's the least I could do. And we plan on that. We make it a priority in our life. Not because we feel like we're robbing God, but because we love God. And we want to give our first fruits. We think about it first, not as an afterthought. We're not giving God our leftovers. And so that you can ask more details. I know I covered all kind of random comments within that. You can speak to me specifically if you want to on those kind of things. But we make giving a priority, and it's a risky thing for a pastor to say that you're not required to give to us. It's a risky thing to say. But I want to follow what I believe the Bible's saying, and not just what makes it easier to make the church function. And so I trust you to hear from God. I trust you love God, and I trust that you want to give to God because you love, and that this is one venue that you give to God is in Convergence Center. That being said, we're going to receive this morning's offering. Have our ushers get ready for that. While they're getting set and getting the baskets, would you guys give this team a hand? You guys can go and see. Yeah, the worship team can get ready, get prepared. Those are difficult questions to answer succinctly. Those are very good questions. If you want clarification on anything, feel free to email, because I know some of those are maybe opening more of a can of worms than answering questions for you. That's one of